And we're going to resume our discussion. And just on a point of information, Deputy Kelly just wants to say something.
Point of information, just for the committee's knowledge, more so than anything else. I know we were sent some documentation in relation to communications. At lunchtime there, I was actually sent a whole pile of documentation with a chronology. I'll read it. Cervical check chronology of events from UL hospitals and associated correspondence. Obviously, they were looking at what was going on here. With full appendices of all backed up documentation, which I've now shared with the committee as well. And obviously, I'd like to ask possibly some questions in relation to it. I know Mr. Woods is gone, which is a pity. I know, but I didn't know he was required. You didn't know this was coming in, did you?
Yeah.
So anyway, for the information of the committee, all of that has been shared. Margaret, I think, has sent it out to everyone. I only received it there at lunchtime.
Have the witnesses seen this document?
I only got it for half an hour ago.
We'll arrange copies of it. It's some correspondence. I haven't looked at it yet, but we can't.
Well, obviously, the clinical lead inside in the hospital decided to send this on, given what was, for clarity reasons, given obviously what transpired here and information they wanted to make clear.
Right, so we'll try.
I think what they did was the right thing to do.
Yeah, so we'll try and get that circulated now. Yeah, we'll have to get copies circulated because people haven't had an opportunity. But we'll in the meantime, we'll proceed. Deputy Kate O'Connell was next, and we're into 10-minute slots for everybody from here on, and we can go back around again. And Deputy Cassels was next, and then I think we're back into the first sequence again. Okay, 10-minute slots. Thank you, Deputy.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from before the lunch break. I want to just focus in on the auditing process and the genesis of cervical check as a programme. So we received data at both committees regarding the test result or the screening data from the labs, and it refers to the period of 2013 to 2016. So the information, the lab data we were given is from that time, but the audit precedes that time. So I'm wondering, is there any reason why we haven't been given the lab data for the time of the audit, and could we have it, please? But at initial observations of the data, it is quite chaotic, just at a first glance. But that said, that mightn't be relevant due to some of the questions that were asked earlier. But I'd just like to point out that, from yesterday I asked at the Health Committee, Dr. Stephanie O'Keefe, to produce the audit methodology paper that was used, and we still haven't got that yet. The one that you mentioned here yesterday.
When you were gone in the later part of the meeting, I mentioned that it actually was in yesterday's papers. It was already there.
Oh, was
so
it?
Yes, you may not have had an opportunity to see it. Apologies. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
I made a note of it. I probably should have come up to you afterwards, but it actually was in yesterday's papers.
Okay, well, I'll just have to get through it then. That's fine. And have we any answer as to why the data we received was from a time that doesn't relate to the audit time? Why was that decided, or who decided on that? I just need a very quick answer because I just don't waste time here.
I'll check. Just I don't know if John, if you know whether that date is available prior to 13-14 as well. Don't know. We'll have to check that for you, Deputy. I don't know why. It
just seems strange. I think Mr. McKenna earlier spoke about the failure rate or the false negative rate of testing ranging between 10 and 40% with international literature. And then we look at the data we got, and Deputy Murphy earlier asked about, was there any other sort of issues around and why there might be such discrepancies. So really what my question is when you were getting the audit data back from external labs, did you get it all in the one basket, or did you get it broken down per lab? Did you look at it as a basket, or did you look at it as an individual lab? And really yes or no will do.
John, could you answer that? It's case by case. A case of cervical cancer, a diagnosis is notified to us. That triggers a review. You go back. You don't know which lab it is until you find out and do the review. You identify a lab. The first one that came in, there's no patterns.
So just to stop you there, so the first question I'm asking is, so Did you, so the trigger was to have cancer, you had cancer to initiate a review. So then did you ever do a spreadsheet of the case and attach it to the lab? So when you did the review, so when you took out person A's slide and you said that's from lab X, did you ever do a chart with the concerning results versus lab? Did you do that?
We looked at those figures, yes.
And did you find out anything?
No.
No. So can
we didn't identify any patterns associated with any particular lab. Which is
so it's not a case of you could have one lab at 90% and you could have one lab at 50%, and if you add the two together, you get a 70%. That's really what I'm getting at.
No, we weren't trying to do that.
You weren't trying?
What we were looking at the number of cases per lab, the number of tests they had done, how many they'd reported negative, and we're not trying to average out across labs. No.
So you were aware of the actual false negatives on a per lab basis?
False negatives are undercalls, a low grade called a high grade. That will be shifted to a high grade later.
Okay.
There's a combination.
And the types of false negatives. When we heard from the witnesses yesterday, so you were looking at just false negatives, or were you looking at types of false negatives? In this, what we've discussed here, I do understand this is screening and all of that, but in the case of Vicky Phelan, the retrospective slide had very clear evidence of cancer. So did you quantify what type of false negative, if you know what I mean, the degree of miss?
It didn't have evidence of cancer, just to clarify. It had high-grade abnormal cells.
Okay, high-grade abnormalities.
Which would have indicated possibly whatever would have happened had a diagnosis happened, then a biopsy. Subsequently, it never did.
That's irrelevant to my point.
Okay. Did we? Yes, we did. We graded them. What's the grade change? Some didn't change. Some graded changed by 1 grade in
No,
pattern
what I'm asking you is that like there's a. If there's a set of eyes looking at wherever the baseline is, so if it's a set of eyes looking at 2 smears and a false negative that could be interpreted perhaps wrong, but the discrepancy between what was on Vicky Phelan's missed or false negative, it I suppose could be considered that it was nearly impossible to miss. Did you look at that, like the degree of miss? Do you understand?
Yeah, no. We characterised the degree of miss, and yes, we would.
And have you anything to show us that?
There wasn't enough of them in all the tests that have been done to say somebody is an individual, a lab or a pathologist, anybody is repeatedly committing a consistent error among the thousands of tests that they're processing.
And do you think, or whoever can answer it, do you think there's an issue? So when we started out and we heard evidence here yesterday in 2008 that we had the highest rate of cervical cancer in Europe at the time. So when you're sending in our stuff into our slides into another population group like in the US, where their parameters for testing are totally different, it's not public, it's not in the public system, it's private health insurance people get smears and that. So did you ever look at the genesis of this, the difference in epidemiological data or population data, and the difference that might have had? So when you're going into the same lab, the baseline difference, the population difference you're starting on. Did you look at the differences there?
No, the approach was you take the laboratory, it must be accredited and various things we've said, and then within that you wrap around. Within the contract, you must comply with the same standards, the quality assurance standards for cervical screening, cytopathology as it would apply to laboratories. Doesn't matter where you're located, this is what you must apply.
And would it be your view that there is no problem there? That if the populations are totally different, would you think that would lead to operator error, as in the person looking at the slides? As if the baseline is different in different countries?
The slides they have abnormal cells or they don't. That's what they're looking for.
I suppose what I'm really getting at is if a guy or a woman is looking at 2 sets of slides, and one is coming from Ireland and it's been done every 3 years, and one's coming from the States and it's been done every year, are the eyes, is there a greater degree of operator error?
I suppose the slide in front of you, whether the woman had a test last year or had a test 3 years ago, is the slide in front of you. The slide in front of you that you were screening at this moment in time. It doesn't matter whether there was a previous test a year ago or 3 years ago. This is the slide in front of you.
No, I'm talking about the slide that was before you, before the operator, a minute before. You know, in a process of someone looking at slides. Does it?
The American College of Gynecologists recommend 3 yearly smears in the US. Whether women have them more often or not would be a matter between them and their private gynecologist, but the recommendation is 3 to 5 yearly, very similar to here.
Then, when the audit happened, when somebody had was diagnosed with cancer and that triggered an audit, who audited the slide? Was it the same lab? So was it a slide on a shelf, or was it photographs of a microscopic image of the slide? So was it looked at by the same company? So was the review of the slide done by the same company that originally read the slide?
It follows the procedure. The original reporting laboratory is asked to retrieve the slide from the archive, take it out, put a team on it, including
their team
first, review the slide and determine what they see. If they see more than 2 grade change difference, that's it. That's reported to us. They've said it. If they say it's still the same as the original interpretation, then it's sent to an external laboratory to see if that can be confirmed or not. And if there's a difference of opinion there, it goes to a second external laboratory, seeking what is the final interpretation upon review of that slide compared to the original interpretation.
So they were policing themselves or auditing themselves?
They're required by contract to do it and report to us the outcome of that. If they don't see a difference, we will go to an external laboratory. If they do, and it's a significant difference, there is no need to go to an external laboratory. They've told us.
Okay. Earlier today, Stephanie O'Keefe Miss O'Keefe or Dr. O'Keefe mentioned that you'd seen slides in response to the audit findings. Do you remember that earlier on? You had a presentation. It was when somebody was questioning whether who invited you.
Yes.
Yeah. And you said that the feelings, and I quote you, that you had were that there was no systemic errors arising from the audit. And the cervicalcheck info they had could be, the information could be informed to the patient. Do you base your clinical judgment on feelings or science?
2 responses to that. One is, and actually to qualify that I'm not a clinical doctor, I'm a social psychologist.
Just to clarify that, Dr. O'Keefe, you're not a medical doctor, you're a doctor of psychology.
Yeah.
And you're in charge of health and well-being?
Yes.
In the HSE?
The Division of Health and Wellbeing, yes. It wasn't that I made that determination myself. It's actually in the March memo and in the February memo. It states that there are no systemic issues of concern as a result of the audit findings. So
I've read the memo, but you said here this morning, in your role as Head of Health and Wellbeing in the HSE, and you being a clinical psychologist with a PhD, that your feelings, like you did say that here.
Yeah, I did. And I'll explain to you why, but I just wanted to clarify first that that judgment wasn't just based on a feeling. That judgment is based on the actual formal findings of this audit process. The reason why I actually say feelings is because the meeting and the presentation happened quite a long time ago, and very often you don't remember what's said, but you do remember how you felt. And I remember feeling a sense of concern as to whether or not they were telling me that there could be some issue that they found as a result of the audits that they had done, and there were quite so many. And within that, I was assured that actually the results were sound, as John has been answering and as some of my colleagues have been answering, that there's nothing within the data, within the audit, that would suggest that there's any systemic issue of concern within those findings. I also had a feeling that I mentioned earlier on about listening about the lady who had cancer and who Professor Flannelly was going to meet. I remember the feeling of that conversation about what that must be like.
And those feelings that you had over that period, did it ever trigger you to, because I met with you yesterday at the Health Committee, and you said that nobody told you that there was an issue in failure in closing out, I think, of the audit process. Is what. So yesterday you didn't really indicate that you had any feelings about concerns that you never really indicated. Yesterday you gave me the impression that to all the evidence that you saw or was given to you by whoever gave it to you, that there was no reason for alarm. And I did question you yesterday, as to did you not think it was all going a bit too well? At some point, did you not go, oh, this is going a bit well, and the doctors are grand with telling the patients everyone seems to be happy. You never seemed to question that. You did say that here yesterday.
That's right. Up until the memo of October 2016, it's really clear from both the briefings that are there and what would have been articulated by the programme that the process is progressing well. We had dealt with the legal challenge from Quest Diagnostics. They were able to restart sending the letters, and the words were incredibly reassuring in relation to what they were doing with regard to reaching out to consultants.
Feelings of concern had dissipated at that point, had they?
There were no concerns once I was aware in February that there were no systemic issues. That concern was gone. So there were no further concerns after the February meeting with regard to the actual findings of the audit. There was a concern that the threat from Quest Laboratories that could pause us sending all of those letters, there was a concern there that process, the dispute resolution process that they wanted to invoke, that could delay the process further of sending the letters to the consulting clinicians, which would go on to patients. That was resolved within 3 months. So that concern was over and done with. So the final thing that was there from my perspective that had been escalated to me, for me to support them in addressing, was to ensure that the historical letters that they had, of which the vast majority of them were sent over a 2-month period in 2016, that they actually were sent, and that the programme assured me then, and the evidence demonstrates that they did do this, that on a scale of about 4 to 6 per month, as new cases were coming in and as the audit findings were being produced, that they would continue to send letters on an ongoing basis at about that pace. In October, it was clear to me, and my briefings to the people that I needed to brief were that this process was going quite well. And as I say, what I said yesterday, and I wasn't asked about my feelings after that particular period, in terms of the period of effectively 2016, was that in 2017 it wasn't brought to my attention that there was a breakdown in that process. With regard to consultants having a difficulty with actually relaying that information to patients, and that's a matter of fact. It wasn't brought to my attention.
Who do you think should have escalated?
Through the governance line. It should have been escalated through the National Screening Service.
Can you just give us what that title is? Because it's very hard on the chart to follow the dots and the lines.
So the Health and Wellbeing Division has got several services. It's got 230 million budget, 1,600 people.
Who should have?
Right underneath that is the Assistant National Director of the National Screening Service, and that's where that information should have come through. And I can see from the evidence that you have before you that there was correspondence during 2017 that formally relayed that there was a concern with regard to consultants relaying that information to their patients, and that wasn't escalated to me. So I wasn't aware of it and wasn't able to help resolve it.
I mean, go on to the last question, and you can get another opportunity.
I just I suppose would like to say that, I think in the world of science we like to separate fact and feelings, and I think
feelings are exceptionally important in this work, especially about what we're talking about right now. I mean,
well, maybe perhaps if feelings are so important, we should have used them when we were trying to decide how to deal with telling patients, and feelings might have really come to the fore if we were putting patients at the centre of this and not not data. You mentioned something earlier about your role in HPV vaccine. I'd just like to put on the record here today for any deputy elected member of this House that has in the past contributed through their reckless and irresponsible contributions to the downward trend in the uptake of the HPV vaccine that will direct the figures you quoted earlier. I thought it was 87% down to 51%, now we're back up to 62%, but maybe I'm wrong. But there's anybody in these houses that made reckless, ill-informed ill-informed commentary regarding the HPV vaccine, including many people that have a direct result in people that girls will in the future die as a result of that. And I just think it's worth, Chair, to mention that here today, because there's a lot of people talking out of multiple sides of whichever orifice you choose.
Okay, Deputy Shane Cassell is the next speaker. And we're on to 10 minutes slots, and we'll start then at the first round of speakers from earlier this morning.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcome to all the witnesses. Chair, I'm going to start with the opening statements from the witnesses, right back at the start of our day, and the reflection on the testimony from yesterday evening, because I'm conscious that the opening statements have obviously been updated last night to take account of the testimony that was heard. And so given that, and given that these were the people that were impacted and they were key witnesses, I want to dwell on it. So they're not just some newspaper headline from this morning and then we shuffle on. So, Mr. Breslin, on page 4 of your statement, you talked that we're seeking to achieve a health service where a relationship with patients is open, honest, listening, supportive. All good buzzwords.